Continuing on in Unit 11, Financial Literacy, we're going to talk today about credit reports. Now, this is going to cover 3 TEKs. The first is 614D. I can explain why it's important to establish a positive credit history. 614E, I can describe the information in a credit report and how long it's retained. And 614F, I can describe the value of credit reports to borrowers and to lenders. Starting off, we do have some vocabulary, first of which is our credit report. And a credit report is a report that shows your bill payment history, your current debt, and other financial information. And as we'll talk about in a moment, there's quite a lot of information on our credit report. So we'll see what that looks like. Bankruptcy is a legal process through which a person who cannot repay their debts can find relief from some or all of their debts, and they have to go to court in order to do this. A credit inquiry is when you apply for a credit card or for a loan and you allow that entity or that bank or whomever it is that is giving you the loan, you're allowing them to check your credit. Next is a collection agency, and that is an organization that specializes in debt collection. The company that you owe your money to can then send the debt to a collection agency, and then that collection agency will be the ones that will be calling you, trying to get the money. And finally, we have debt, and debt is money, goods, or services owed to others. Our essential question for today: would a positive credit report result in a higher or lower interest rate when getting a loan? Or conversely, would a negative credit report result in a higher or lower interest rate when getting a loan? So we will be able to answer this question at the end of today's lesson, or by the end of today's lesson. Before we look at a credit report, it's important to understand what's on there. So we're going to look at a few things that we'll notice when we do look at a credit report here in just a moment, some things that we're going to find. So on our credit report, we will see that we have our names, your current address, your past addresses, your phone numbers, your employers, your date of birth, social security number. So a lot of personal information is found on the credit report. Also, there's credit information and payment history that will include your lender information, so who you owe money to, the type of credit, whether it's auto financing if I bought a car, credit cards, installment loans, home mortgages, the date that the account was open and the date the account was closed. So if I pay something off or cancel the credit card, those dates are there. The length of credit history, so how long I've had each of those accounts, how long I've been paying on my car, each credit card, etc., and the amount owed. So the amount of each of those loans is on my credit report. There's also some public information that's on there. Bankruptcy filings, there's tax liens, failure to pay taxes, foreclosures. The lender sells the borrower's property for not making payments. So if I stop making payments on my house, they're going to kick me out of the house. The bank that I owe the loan to that owns the mortgage, they're going to just sell my house and then they're going to get their money that way. Also wage garnishment, so it's money deducted from my paycheck for child support or money that I owe for student loans, things of that nature. Lastly is credit inquiry. So self-inquiry, so if I check my own credit report, that's there. The credit application inquiry, so if I'm applying for a new credit card, I'm trying to buy a car, things of that nature, that'll be on there. Employment inquiry, so if I want to get a job, most employers these days do check your credit. So they have to get my permission to do so, but they're going to check my credit to see whether or not I'm responsible. Court order inquiries, insurance application, so when I get new car insurance, they're going to run my credit and see if I'm responsible before deciding what to charge me for car insurance or home insurance. Rental application inquiry, so if I want to rent an apartment or rent a house, they're going to check my credit. Cell phone application inquiry, So if I want to buy a new cell phone, I'll switch from AT&T to T-Mobile or what have you, the new company is going to run my credit to determine whether or not that I'm going to have to pay deposits and extra fees up front. There's other companies that do that as well. A lot of utility companies will also run your credit for the same reasons. So important things to note is the length that information is retained or remains on your credit report. So credit inquiries. So if somebody's just looking at my credit, that's going to stay on there for 2 years. A whole bunch of these is a bad thing. Just one credit inquiry, just in isolation, if say I want to try to rent an apartment, that's not a big deal. If I open up one new credit card, not a big deal. But if I'm trying to open up a bunch of credit cards all at once or trying to get a bunch of loans all at once, that's a red flag to the credit companies because they're thinking, oh, this person must be desperate trying to get a bunch of money because they don't have any money. And so a bunch of credit inquiries, like in a short amount of time, is bad. But just one credit inquiry is not really that big of a deal by itself. And credit inquiries stay on your credit report for 2 years. Late payments, now this one is bad. Late payments stay on your credit report for 7 years. So if I don't pay something and it goes to a collection agency, that stays on my credit report for 7 years. That means the next 7 years after I take care of that and close that account, for the next 7 years, anytime that I want to do anything, get a job, buy something big, anything like that, they're going to look at my credit report and see that mistake that I had. Also, if we skip down to the bottom, up to 10 years for bankruptcy. So if I file bankruptcy and have the court just say that I don't owe any more money to anybody, then that's going to be on my credit report for 10 years. That means it takes 10 years for that to come off my credit report. So it's going to be really, really difficult to buy a house, buy a car, or make any of those types of things for the next 10 years. Now, the third one is actually a good thing. So this one is really, really good. So if I have an account that I keep in good standing, I make all my payments on time, I do everything I'm supposed to do, and then that account ends up getting closed, that good information will stay on my account for 10 years. So for the next 10 years, anybody who runs my credit will see this good information. And so there is a good thing there with the credit reports. Why is a credit report important? Your credit report is important because lenders, insurers, employers, and others may obtain your credit report from credit bureaus to assess how you manage financial responsibilities. For example, lenders may use your credit report information to decide whether you can get a loan and the terms or interest rate you get for that loan. Insurance companies may use the information to decide whether you can get insurance and set the rates you will pay. Employers may use your credit report, if you give them permission to do so, to decide whether to hire you. Telephone and utility companies may use the information to decide whether to provide services for you, and if they do, then they may also still charge you a deposit or higher fees. Landlords may use the information to determine whether to rent an apartment or a house to you. All right, so now we're going to look at a credit report, and some things that we need to do is we need to highlight in yellow anything that is negative and highlight in green anything that is positive. So here's a sample credit report. And we see there's some personal information here. Charles T. Borrower, and we see there's the report number, the report date, social security number, date of birth, telephone number, current address where he lives now, previous address where he lived before, and then we see employment information. So this is where he works. So we have an employer there, and then his previous employer as well. So because the employers check your credit, all that information is on your credit reports. There's some public records, so we see some information that's here. New City Municipal Courts. Ooh, that doesn't sound good. Type civil judgment, municipal, date paid, $2,500. Ooh, that does not sound good at all. So if we look here, we see the responsibility was the participant on the account, plaintiff, the Bank of Austin, in the amount of $2,500. So it looks like what happened was he owed some money. He had a loan through this bank and didn't pay that loan. So because he didn't pay the loan, then what ended up happening is that bank, the Bank of Austin, had to take him to court and sue him for that money. So that's definitely a bad thing. So we'll highlight that in yellow. And it says the estimated date that this item will be removed from his credit report is 2015. So if we notice, there's something very important here. The date that is paid is March of 2008. It's not going to come off till February of 2015. So if you remember, that's 7 years. It takes 7 years for this to come off of his credit report. So that's a pretty important thing. And so for the next 7 years, anytime he tries to rent a house, rent an apartment, buy a car, do anything major, get a new job, try to get new insurance, then they're going to see this, and he's probably going to end up either getting declined or having to pay higher rates. Let's see, adverse accounts, potentially negative items. So financial collection recovery, that sounds like a debt collector. We do see this zero balance, so that might be a good thing, but let's keep looking. The original balance was $500. That was for Target. Credit limit, so this was a Target credit card. He had a $1,000 credit limit, but he owed $500 on it. All right, past due is 0, so it seems okay. But let's look over here. Pay status. Payment made after sent to the collection agency. Ooh, so he didn't pay his Target credit card. So they sent it to collections, and then he finally paid it after the Go collectors called him and bothered him about it. Paid the collection agency, so that's important. But then we look here. So he paid off this debt in 2009, but again, it's not coming off of his credit report till 2016. So 7 years that stays on his credit reports. All right, next thing we see is some bank loans. So there's a bank loan here and the pay status. The pay status says that it is 150 days past due. That means he hasn't paid this bill for a couple of months, right? So he just hasn't paid his bill at all, and that's a bad thing. So original balance was $10,200. Current balance is $9,900. See, he paid a little bit, but he's not paying it like he's supposed to, so it is past due. All right, continuing on, accounts in good standing. So satisfactory, these are good things on his credit report, so we'll highlight those in green. We see he had a $20,000 balance, and his past due, or the money that he owes now, is 0. So that means he paid all of it off. And let's see here, the terms of the payments is that he paid as agreed. So he made all of his payments on time when he was supposed to. So that's a good thing. So even though that's paid off, that's going to stay on his credit report. So that's good. And then the last thing we see is credit inquiries. So Green Tree Apartments, they checked his credits so that way maybe he could get an apartment. So see here, tenant screening. So they ran his credit to see if they wanted to rent an apartment to him. And then over here, credit card services and for credit transactions. So he tried to get a credit card, and so those are the credit inquiries. Notice that this is in 2008. 2010. So in isolation, these are not really a bad thing. They're certainly not necessarily a good thing either. They're just on there showing that he applied for credit during those times. But because they're just one by itself, it's not a bad thing.